Wake-up call. How long are you planning to wait? Tomorrow? When things are more perfect? When you have more time, more energy, more confidence? Number tomorrow is the most deceptive promise you've ever believed. It's pretty, it's smooth, it comforts you into postponing. Just a little longer, and then a little more, until your entire life becomes a list of "I will." But you know what's scarier than failure? A life that never begins. How many times have you told yourself, next week I'll start, next month I'll change, next year I'll be different? But time doesn't wait for you to be ready. It moves minute by minute, hour by hour, silently stealing chances from your hand without warning. And every minute you spend lost in chaos is a minute stolen from yourself. No one else is destroying you. It's you, with every shake of the head that says, not yet. Be honest, that thing you call not ready is just fear in disguise. You're afraid to begin because you know that beginning means facing it. Facing your lack of discipline, facing the old habits that drag you down day after day. But if you don't stand up, if you don't choose, right here, right now, then don't expect tomorrow to do it for you, because tomorrow has no magic. It only repeats today. And if today you surrender, tomorrow will look the same, or worse. So stop writing another empty promise. Write a commitment, short, strong. Type it out right now and let it become the reboot command for your life. Today I take command of my life. I am stoic. Not a slogan, not a trend, a declaration of rebirth. Because a stoic does not wait for perfect conditions. They act in the chaos. They don't seek peace out there. They create peace within. And so can you. Right now, not tomorrow. Stoic lesson number 1. Change begins with ruthless self-questioning. No one wants to look at the wound. Everyone wants to bandage it up fast, cover it, forget it, move on like it never hurt. But that's exactly what keeps you stuck in the place you don't want to be. Running from the truth traps you in an invisible loop. You act, you hustle, you start 1,000 things, and quit. You see your potential, but every night you feel hollow. Not because you lack motivation, but because you've never really asked, why am I doing all this? Am I truly living, or just existing on someone else's script? It's easy to fill your life with action, with to-do lists, with 100 distractions. But it's much harder to sit down and face the truth. That you don't know why you're running. That you're moving not towards something meaningful, but away from something you fear inside. Change doesn't begin with new actions. It begins the moment you dare to stop. Not to escape, but to face. To ask, why do I repeat the same mistakes? Why do I know I should choose A, but keep choosing B? Why do I reach for something, then pull myself back down? The world isn't complicated. You just haven't decoded yourself. And if you don't understand yourself, you'll always be betrayed by yourself. A Stoic doesn't act to escape. They act to illuminate. Every action is the outcome of a question answered with brutal honesty. Why am I choosing this? Is it from belief or fear? And if you haven't asked that, don't rush forward, because moving without knowing why is like walking into a maze without a map. You don't need speed, you need direction. And the only real direction is inward. There, the answer is waiting for you to dare to ask. Stoic lesson number 2. Architect of your own life. You didn't choose where you were born. You didn't choose your parents, your childhood, or those first wounds that shaped you. But at some point in your life, you must decide, will you keep living as an effect or rise as a cause? How much longer will you keep blaming the past, society, the people who doubted you, your ex, the education system, your luck, as if you're just a product of circumstances, as if everything in your life simply happens to you. Not because of you, but you weren't born to react to the world. You were born to design your inner world, and from there, build the outer one. You are the architect, not the victim. And once you stop demanding the world to be kinder and instead become stronger, you'll see true strength doesn't come from anyone else, but from your silence in the face of adversity. No complaints, no excuses, no need to be understood, just action, and action born from a clear truth. Everything in my life, if not created by me, is still my responsibility to respond to. You may not control what others do to you, but you always control what you turn it into inside you. An excuse to collapse or a reason to rise. Every blame is a brick thrown away. Every moment of responsibility is a brick laid in your foundation. What are you building? A fortress or a grave? The Stoic does not live in the illusion that the world must be fair. They train themselves not to be defeated. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes invincible when it refuses to be enslaved by externals." So can you. Don't wait for the storm to pass to begin living. Learn to rebuild the roof, in the rain, because only when you carry it all without a single complaint will you discover you can rebuild everything from the ruins. Stoic lesson number 3, become worthy, not just successful. Some people reach what they dreamed of, only to lose it faster than they ever imagined. Not because they lack the ability to achieve it, but because they didn't have the structure to hold it. Not because the dream was wrong, but because they weren't mature enough to live inside it. And you're no different. If you keep asking, "How do I get it?" you'll stay lost in tactics and forget the foundation. The right question isn't, "What do I do?" but "Who am I becoming?" Because if you don't transform your being, the result will slip through your fingers like sand. The truth is, real success doesn't come from suddenly receiving something, but from being inwardly prepared not to collapse when it arrives. Success doesn't just require skill, it requires inner strength to bear its weight. A Stoic does not build castles on sand. They build from deep identity, in how they rise each morning, in how they speak to themselves when no one listens, in the quiet choices made when no one's watching, because they understand. Results don't arrive by luck. They reflect who you are. What do you want? A career? A relationship? A name? Ask again, what kind of person is worthy of that life? And have you lived like that person yet? Don't wait to achieve it before you change. Change first, so when the opportunity arrives, you don't have to stretch yourself to hold on. You'll already be the one it belongs to. The Stoic doesn't try to shine. They sharpen, silently. They train day after day, like the blacksmith forging a blade. Not for display, but for the battle. You can't control when success knocks, but you can control who you are when it does. And when you become worthy, you no longer need to grip anything in fear. You hold it with presence. Stoic lesson number 4. You're tired from chaos, not effort. You're not tired because you do too much. You're tired because you keep doing without knowing why. You wake up to a long list of tasks, but none of them make your heart beat faster. You keep swimming in a sea of busy work, never touching the deep shore of life. And then you sit there drained, thinking you need rest. But the truth is, you don't need rest. You need direction. You need to remember why you began. You need to reconnect with something deeper than your calendar, deeper than expectations, deeper than numbers and performance, because it's not motion that breaks the body, it's being lost. And the mind doesn't overload from pressure, it collapses when it no longer knows what it's pushing for. A mind without a why is dragged by the winds toward anywhere. And that anywhere, that is what eats you alive, slowly, daily. You call it stress, but it's inner chaos, a split between what you do and who you want to be, the repetition of days with no center, of actions born without intention, of effort without soul. A Stoic doesn't chase rest as an escape. They use it to rebuild their inner structure, a return to the beginning, to ask the core question, what am I doing this to live out? And if the answer's not clear, they stop, not out of laziness, out of clarity, because wisdom sometimes means knowing when to stop running blindly. You don't need more time to work. You need more reason to live with intention. You don't need more coffee or another vacation. You need stillness. You need to look closely at the mountain of things you push for each day and ask which one truly matters to you, which one feeds you, which one strengthens you, not just keeps you busy. And when you find that, rest comes on its own, not forced, not escaped into, but arrived at, because you've stopped running from yourself. You've come home. Stoic lesson number 5. You don't need inspiration. You need honor. Inspiration is beautiful, but unreliable. It shows up when you're high, leaves when you're low. It's a fickle lover, not a loyal companion. And if you keep waiting for it to act, your life will be a series of interruptions, missed chances, and delayed starts. You say you'll begin when the fire comes, but fire doesn't always burn. The Stoic knows this. They don't need fire to begin. They need a reason. They need honor. They need the vow they made to themselves. Because honor with the self is the one thing no one can steal. It's what gets you up in the morning, not because someone's waiting, but because something inside you refuses to live shallowly. To act with honor means to act even when no one watches. To do the work with no applause, to show up when your heart feels flat, but your mind is steady and your self-respect is watching. The Stoic doesn't need to feel like doing it. They do it because they've chosen it. And once chosen, there are no bargains, no excuses, no hiding. Because every time you do the right thing, without needing to feel like it, you build your resolve. And that repeated resolve becomes the backbone of your identity. Identity is not what you claim. It's what you sustain, quietly, day after day, especially on days when nothing feels special. Honor has no trumpet. It's the whisper you hear each time you stand between two roads, the easy way or the right way. And the Stoic always chooses right, not because they don't feel tired, but because they refuse to lose respect for themselves. If inspiration comes, good. If not, it changes nothing. Because they don't live to be inspired. They live to be someone they can look at in the mirror each morning without looking away. And if you want to become that kind of person too, then don't ask, do I feel motivated today? Ask instead, did I keep my word to myself today? Stoic lesson number 6. One small step is worth more than a grand abandoned dream. People don't break because they lack dreams. They burn out because they keep dreaming without ever starting, because they keep talking about goals without lifting a single step toward them, because they paint dazzling visions in their heads, then use those very visions to scare themselves into thinking they're not ready. And that's how you get stuck. Not from lack of vision, but from waiting for the perfect day to begin. While the Stoic knows the perfect day never comes. There is only today, with a bit of leftover energy, a scrap of time between chaos, with a mind that's still messy, but still capable of beginning. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And the strange thing is, a single honest step forward can shatter more stagnation than any temporary burst of emotion ever could. You don't need to change your whole life today. You just need to do one thing for the right reason, then repeat it tomorrow. Even if you go slow, even if no one sees it, even if no one understands, you're still moving forward and forward, not to prove anything, but to stay loyal to the path you've chosen. Sometimes you'll ask yourself, can this tiny act really change anything? But you don't need to change the whole world. You just need to change yourself first, bit by bit, act by act, reaction by reaction, small intentional decisions. That's what binds you back to your core. You don't need everything all at once. You need to keep your rhythm, not black or white, not victory or failure. Just don't stop. Because you understand, one step won't take you to the finish line, but it will take you off the spot, and someone no longer stuck is already different. No longer a victim, but a doer. No longer blaming, but carrying. No longer dreaming, but building, brick by brick, step by step. And that is how the Stoics shapes their destiny, not with applause, but with silent, relentless repetition, unseen, but known. Stoic lesson number 7. Strength comes from truth that doesn't need to be accepted. No one lives without ever wanting to be seen, without ever smiling to please, without ever staying silent to avoid conflict, without ever pretending to be okay just to keep things easy. But the cost of compliance is inner division. It's waking up each day as a more acceptable version of yourself, easier to digest, easier to like, but farther from who you really are, and slowly you lose your true voice, not because someone silenced it, but because you did. You dimmed it to become a version that fits in. But the Stoic knows, truth does not need acceptance to be valuable. It holds weight on its own, regardless of applause. And living in your truth is not rebellion, it is the highest form of self-respect. You don't need to impress everyone. You just need to be honest enough to look yourself in the mirror without shame. And the strange thing is, when you live in truth, you no longer need to convince anyone, because inner solidity carries its own gravity. Authenticity has a silent magnetism. Not everyone will love it, but everyone will feel it. You don't live for the applause. You live so you don't betray yourself. You don't need constant agreement. You need one principle that can't be bought. The Stoic doesn't use reputation as their compass. They use consistency. They know everyone has opinions, but only they must live fully in their skin, with their choices, with their consequences. So they choose truth, even if it's quiet, even if it's misunderstood, even if it costs them a few fragile connections. In return, they preserve the one relationship that must never be lost, the one with their own conscience. And if you keep worrying what others think of you, you'll forget the most important question. What do you think of yourself? Who are you living as? Are you being honest with the deepest part of your heart? Or are you merely surviving as a mask the crowd temporarily applauds? Stoic lesson number 8. The comfort zone isn't the enemy if you know how to expand it. People love to say, get out of your comfort zone, as if it's a place of weakness, as if growth only lives in hardship and danger. But no one tells you this. The comfort zone, if you use it right, is where you can train silently, without the world distracting you. The comfort zone isn't where you hide. It's the foundation you build on, the space you prepare in, the place where you sharpen yourself in quiet. So when real chaos hits, you don't collapse. You stand firm as if you saw it coming. The Stoic doesn't disrespect stability. They use it to create depth, to build the base of identity. They don't wait for disaster to learn resilience. They don't wait for pain to develop strength. They do it when no one's watching, when no one's demanding, when everything is still calm. They don't chase recklessness to prove their grit. They just expand the edges of their control, little by little. And that steady, conscious expansion, that is real growth, not loud, not dramatic, but grounded and deep, like a tree rooting itself before it breaks through the earth. If you're always running from comfort without knowing what you're training for, you'll just keep repeating confusion in every new place you land, with no core to hold you. But if you know exactly what you're building, then even inside your comfort zone, every day can be a day of evolution, not through instability, but through self-discipline. You don't need to destroy what's working. You need to make it richer. You don't need to place yourself in storms to get strong. You just need to learn to stay steady in silence. The Stoic chooses to train when training isn't required, because they know when the time comes, there will be no time left to prepare, and you should too. Don't rush out just to escape boredom. Stay, dig deeper, raise the standard, quietly stretch each boundary until your comfort zone becomes your new strength. Stoic lesson number 9, doing it when you don't want to. That's power. Not every day will you want to act. Not every moment will you have the energy, the excitement, the spark. Sometimes it's just a gray morning, a lazy mind, a sluggish body, nothing calling you to rise, nothing urgent pushing you to move, and so you start negotiating with yourself, telling yourself it's okay to wait, that tomorrow's better, that today's not the right time, that rest now means better work later. But deep down, you know that delay isn't about rest. It's about fear. Fear of starting, fear of being imperfect, fear of moving without momentum. But the Stoic doesn't follow moods. They follow commitments. They don't wait until they want to act. They act because it's the right thing to do. And it's exactly in the moments when you don't want to that real strength is forged, because that's when you're not relying on feelings, but on yourself, on your word, on the principle you chose to live by. People admire the discipline, not because they're machines, but because their force comes from within. The Stoic understands keeping your word to yourself is the highest form of self-respect. You say you want to change your life. So how many promises to yourself have you kept? How many things have you done that you knew mattered, even when they weren't easy? Every time you do what you don't feel like doing, not out of pressure, but out of inner clarity, you engrave determination into your identity. And with every one of those moments, you strengthen the belief that you are someone you can trust. That's the root of mental power. No motivation needed, no praise, no supervisor, just one thing, your own commitment, and the will to live as if nothing is more important than honoring it. Because truly nothing is more important than who you are when no one is looking, what you do when no one's watching, and whether you keep your word, even when you're the only one who knows you made it. Stoic lesson number 10, choose relationships like you choose environments. Every person you let into your life is a decision about your emotional environment, an invitation to influence, a gateway that either feeds or drains your inner world. Have you noticed? Some people leave you lighter, seen, awakened, make you want to become better, and some make you shrink, doubt yourself, feel scattered, lost. You think it's weakness, but it's not. You're simply living in an emotionally polluted environment without realizing it. You eat clean, you work out, you read, but then you sit next to people who plant doubt, speak in negatives, see with narrow vision, and expect yourself to thrive. You can't fly if you're tied to weights pulling you down. The Stoic doesn't hate anyone, but they are deliberate about who gets access to their energy. They don't connect for fun. They connect to build. They don't need many friends. They need the right ones. They know that the right relationship doesn't need many words, but always brings clarity, depth, alignment. The wrong one, it tilts you off balance, depletes you, makes you lose your inner coherence. You don't need someone perfect. You need someone with whom you don't have to pretend. No mask, no defense, no trading pieces of yourself for their presence. And if you often leave a conversation feeling smaller, more confused, more alone, that's not coincidence. That's a signal. Listen to it. Choose your people like you choose your home. Choose those who bring you peace, depth, and steadiness, because you're either growing with them or withering beside them. There's no neutral. The Stoic doesn't live in isolation, but they live with intention, because they know inner strength comes not only from within, but from guarding your space from anything that pulls you off your chosen path. Stoic lesson number 11. Money reflects thinking, not human worth. Money says nothing about your dignity, but it reveals everything about how you think, about your relationship with enoughness, about how you respond to desire, to pressure, to the fear of lack, to the temptation of owning more to feel worth more. And the truth is, if you don't master your greed, you'll never master your finances. No matter how much you earn, you'll live in lack. You'll spend to fill identity gaps. You'll chase the external to numb the emptiness within. But the Stoic knows freedom doesn't come from account balances, but from inner sufficiency, from intentional spending, centered living, conscious choices. At that point, money is no longer a goal. It's a tool to live more rightly, more deeply, not more loudly. You don't need to be rich to be free. You just need to know what truly matters to you. What's essential, what's noise, what you've borrowed from other people's expectations. Because if you don't define your own enough, the world will define it for you. And the world is always hungry, always selling more, always pushing you to buy, to prove, to display, never whispering that you're already enough. And the more you follow that noise, the further you drift from yourself. The Stoic doesn't reject material things, but they don't let those things define their identity. They earn, but not to be admired. They spend, but not to cover insecurity. They live like they don't need to be seen, as long as they're aligned with their chosen values. And if today you're anxious about money, not because of lack, but because of lack of clarity, then pause. Look again. What do you truly need? What are you using to numb emotion? What are you clinging to that feels like freedom, but really is control? Then begin again with less but more awareness. Because sometimes real freedom isn't having more, it's needing less and living with sharp clarity in every choice you decide to keep. Stoic lesson number 12. You can't control the world. You can only control yourself. You can't control what others think, say, or do. You can't control the weather, the news, the market, luck, or the ever-shifting tide of life. You can't stop someone from leaving. You can't make everything go your way. And the more you try to manage what's beyond your reach, the more powerless you feel. Like life is a game where you're always reacting. But the Stoic doesn't live to control the world. They live to control themselves. They begin by asking, what can I control and what can I only observe? Then they place all their energy into the first, and the second, they release, not out of defeat, but out of clarity, out of wisdom, Out of the deep, knowing that gripping the strings of what cannot be held only tangles your heart, tires your mind, drains your strength, and steals your time without changing a thing. You don't need to force life to obey your will. You only need to take full responsibility for how you respond, how you perceive, how you choose your next step. That space, where you still have the power to choose, is your real control zone. Everything else is noise, wind, static, and you can learn to stand still within while the outside spins. Not to run away, but to remain awake. Because peace does not come from things going smoothly. It comes from not needing things to go smoothly in order to be at peace. You let go, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to stop resisting reality. You stop forcing life to bend and start focusing on bending yourself to respond better, choose better, live better. So instead of saying everything is chaos, you'll say, I remain grounded amidst what I cannot control. And that groundedness becomes the foundation of a strength no one can take away. The strength of someone who knows exactly who they are and is mastering the one thing they were ever truly meant to control, themselves. Stoic lesson number 13. Patience is the skill of the enduring. Everyone wants change, but no one wants to wait. No one wants to repeat something simple every day in silence without immediate results. No one wants to take small steps when the outside world is busy flaunting breakthroughs, viral hits, and overnight wins. But the Stoic is not seduced by speed. They know what comes fast rarely stays, and what's truly deep always takes time. Not time for waiting, but time for enduring the repetition of right actions. Quietly, steadily, without applause, without attention, without instant payoff. Because they know real change does not come from bursts of inspiration. It comes from the discipline of reprogramming yourself piece by piece. A few lines written today, waking up 10 minutes earlier, choosing silence over reaction, focus over distraction, following through instead of making excuses. One more step instead of stopping. And then again, repeated. Not for show, not for praise, not for approval, but because they've decided to live this way. They don't need immediate results. They need a solid foundation. And patience is what allows that foundation to deepen, ripen, solidify. Like roots growing into the earth, silent but never pointless. You'll find that your transformation didn't come from some grand event. It came because you didn't quit on those plain, dull, lonely days. Because you kept the small flame of your commitment alive even when emotions faded. Because you kept walking when everything said stop. That's patience. Not flashy, not loud, but relentless like stone sharpening your will. And the Stoic trains it daily. Not so others can admire their patience, but so they never have to start over because they quit halfway. Because they know true endurance doesn't come from a moment of strength. It comes from not giving up during the most forgettable moments of all. Stoic lesson number 14. Don't believe every voice in your head. The mind is not always a reliable companion. Sometimes it whispers fear. Sometimes it amplifies doubt. Sometimes it disguises laziness as reasonable excuses. And you think it's truth, that you're not ready, that you should wait a little longer, that now isn't the right time, that tomorrow will be better. But the Stoic knows the mind is like weather. It shifts, it fluctuates, it reacts, but it does not lead. You cannot hand the steering wheel of your life to something that rises and falls with emotion. You cannot let a voice in your head, born of fear or old habits, dictate your actions now. Because that voice doesn't speak for who you're becoming. It speaks for who you used to be. The version that hesitated, that feared, that disappointed, but you're no longer that person. And if you let that voice lead, you'll go exactly where you've already been. Not because you lack ability, but because you were persuaded by an inner echo that no longer fits you. The Stoic doesn't deny the voice in their head. They hear it, but they don't obey it blindly. They reflect. They question. They choose who gets to be the true commander. And only action, deliberate, committed action, is a commander they trust. Because only action creates real motion. Only action changes reality. Only action pushes you past yourself. You are not your worst thought. You are not this morning's hesitation. You are what you choose to do next, no matter what your mind says. And every time you act despite fear, every time you move forward through doubt, you declare that you are leading, not the small voice that's kept you small for years. The Stoic doesn't demand a perfect mind. They just demand of themselves one thing: clarity strong enough not to let the mind pull them off the path they've already chosen. Stoic lesson number 15. Greatness isn't in doing more, but in doing precisely. You don't need to do everything. You just need to do what matters. But the trap of this age is convincing you that doing more is success, that being busy is value, that a packed schedule is the mark of someone with purpose. But look closely. How many things are you doing just so you don't feel left behind? How many tasks do you take on not because they're necessary, but because they momentarily distract you from the emptiness inside? And then you burn out, not from doing too much, but from doing too much of what doesn't matter. You pour your most precious energy into things you never consciously chose. But the Stoic doesn't live to chase everything. They choose. They'd rather do less, but deeper, than more and shallow. They don't ask, what more can I add? They ask, which one thing, if done right, will change everything else? They don't get pulled by speed. They return to precision, to essence, to depth. Because they know if you're running without knowing where you're going, then the faster you run, the further you drift from yourself. The difference is not in frequency, but in direction, not in noise, but in clarity. And clarity only comes when you stop long enough to ask, what am I really chasing? And why? Because without a clear why, you'll be swept into someone else's, dragged by their standards, pulled into orbits that aren't yours. The Stoic doesn't allow that. They choose well and commit deeply. They're not afraid of doing little. They're afraid of doing wrong because they know every action is a statement of identity. And if you feel exhausted yet going nowhere, maybe it's not a lack of ability. Maybe it's a lack of precision. You're scattered instead of focused, chasing quantity over quality, following the crowd instead of sitting down and asking, what's the one thing, if done well today, would make everything else easier or unnecessary? That answer, if you find it, is the starting point of real greatness. Less, but better and deeper. Finale, a silent oath, but one that cannot be undone. It's time to pause, not to rest, but to stand tall, to look back at the road you've walked, the loops you've fallen into, the times you forgave your own delay, excused your own weakness, convinced yourself it's not time yet. But that time is now. You don't need another crisis to wake up. You don't need another downfall to start living real. You don't need to crash again to realize how far you've drifted from yourself. The truth is, you already know it's time to reorder. Not just your desk, your habits, or your calendar, but your inner world, your beliefs, your values, your commitments. Because you can't keep living in the old way and expect a new life. Can't keep thinking the same and expect a new identity. Can't stay fragile in the same way and expect new strength. And you don't need to be perfect to begin. You just need to be honest enough to stop and tell yourself, I don't promise to always be strong, but I refuse to be weak in the same way again. Because real strength isn't in never falling. It's in standing up differently, with more grit, more clarity, more resolve. This isn't a life-changing moment overnight. This is a promise you renew every morning, a commitment you hold even when no one sees, a choice you make when no one's cheering, a quiet choice, but one that changes everything. If you're ready, write it down. No ceremony needed, just truth. Today I reorganize my life. I am stoic. Write it not to remember, but to anchor, not to announce to the world, but to not forget yourself. Because from this moment on, you don't live by emotion. You live by choice, and you will continue in silence, but steady as carved stone.